Welcome to the 18th episode of Hands Up, and this is the first one in 2026. And today we are going to discuss the book Why the Poor Don't Kill Us by Manu Joseph. It's a very clickbaity title and also has a lot of political and social commentary. I found it very amusing and it was quite a page turner. Uh, I was able to finish it in like 2 days or 3 days, I guess. And to discuss this with me, I have a very qualified person. It's Abhishek Pisharody, who works as a political consultant. And he also wrote a very interesting review of this, very critical review of this. So I'm quite excited to discuss this book with him. Abhishek, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Abhishek Pisharody. I'm a consultant and development practitioner, and I've worked with nonprofits, with think tanks, and currently advising a major political party. And so yeah, I had the pleasure of, or displeasure rather, of reading this book some time ago, and I have a lot of thoughts. So excited to discuss it.
Okay, let's get down to it. So I didn't understand where to put this book. I felt it's an extended, funny stand-up. Or you also said someone commented on your post saying that it's a stand-up comedy script. It was very amusing and entertaining. So broadly, what do you feel about this book?
So broadly, I feel this book occupies a certain space in literature where it sort of straddles the line of satire and actual uh, social commentary meant to convey a point, where while not clear which side of the line it falls exactly, it's it can be read as satire, I suppose, but also there are several points in the book where it seems that the author is trying to make a deeper point with a certain amount of intellectual seriousness, and then when actually interpreted that way, the book actually begins to seem slightly more hollow.
Like a lot of things which are said in a book are plausibly deniable. Like you can never put him in a box and say he's a leftist or a rightist or a centrist or whatever it is. Like he plays around with so many ideas without actually coming across as taking any stand at all.
Exactly, and I think therein lies the crucial intellectual failure of the book, right? It's because if through the using nebulous definitions, through talking in very broad strokes and saying things that are actually neither true nor false, the book avoids actually taking a stance on anything, as you said, and as such can be read basically any way you like. A more charitable reader would feel that, oh, that's really funny, but a reader who's approaching it to try to actually understand, because the book has the subtitle, the psychology of Indians, so someone actually trying to read it and understand the psychology of Indians, as it were, might find themselves with a very different reading.
Yeah, actually, I told one of my friends who was also a past guest on this podcast that okay, I'm doing this. And she said, I've never heard a negative review of the book. It seems like everyone is enjoying it and seeing it in a positive light. So I think your views will be very, different. It will probably stand out as well. And in your review, you say that trivializes issues like caste and poverty, which are like very big issues in our political discourse, right? So why don't you tell us like how it trivializes caste, and then probably we'll discuss poverty as well.
Right. When reading the book, I was interested in actually deconstructing the kind of framework that it tries to construct. And so, what was interesting to me is not just what it says, but also what it doesn't say and how it says what it says. So, talking about caste, right? You wanted to start with caste.
Yeah.
So, I think one of the main defining characteristics of this work is that it's not interested in a substantive evaluation of caste as an organizing category of Indian society at all. Right? In fact, it takes great stakes to avoid analyzing caste as much as it can, and where it does mention it, it largely treats it as some useless distraction from the real issues that matter, which are things like, okay, our roads are full of potholes, our houses, our public hospitals are not functioning, our schools are bad, and all of those are important issues, sure, but to actually decouple them from caste is to try to understand the world in a very kind of middle class and elite, almost privileged manner. That isn't the case for the vast majority of Indians, right? So I make the point in my review that caste is not just an identity marker, but also the organizing principle of Indian society, right? Like, because when you talk about things like healthcare, education, infrastructure, caste determines who gets the healthcare, education, and infrastructure, right? If you look anywhere in Indian society, which neighborhoods have better amenities and infrastructure, it will be upper caste neighborhoods, right? Why do poor people struggle so much and don't get their amenities? Because the resources don't flow towards the neighborhoods that are dominated and ghettoized by members of lower caste communities. And so by systematically ignoring that, it's a huge limitation of the analysis. And actually, so while the audience, the kind of upper middle class, elite English educated audience that might be interested in reading such a work might come away thinking that, yes, this makes a great deal of sense. Uh, Actually, it doesn't seem like the author, Manu Joseph, actually understands the way resources are distributed, or the reasoning between why resources are distributed the way that they are, very well at all.
Yeah, I think that is the issue with op-eds, right? Like op-eds can be either data heavy or like it just can have a vague idea which is extended based on some anecdotes. I think he does a very good job in choosing interesting anecdotes to hold all this narrative together. Like he has some vague ideas which are well structured with all these anecdotes. It makes it very enjoyable reading, for that matter. But I also wanted to have a side chat about like how caste is very prevalent, but also we try to pretend it doesn't prevail. Like for example, if someone asks you what is your name, you just say your first name, and then they clarify, is that all your name? What is your second name? Like generally, a lot of people have the second name as their caste, right? So it is like you are being measured in the first interaction itself about where you belong, irrespective of your capabilities or qualifications or job or whatever it is. And then even those who say they're very liberal and I mean there would be so many instances which you would have also come across. Is there something which stands out and like it hits in your face kind of a thing?
So yes, you correctly note that that India's great surname obsession, and actually, because
And it's more prevalent in North India, by the way.
right, I think the way caste is manifest is diverges in South India and North India for sure. And I think as far as the book is concerned, it's because when reading the book, and everyone wants to believe that they're above it, right? Everyone wants to believe that they're above it, as you noted, that we all want to think that actually, we're so elite and educated and caste doesn't matter to us anymore. But before caste cannot matter to you, you need to actually be at a certain level in the hierarchy, right? And then you be like, hey, I just got where I was because of pure merit, right? Surely
Yeah.
my caste has nothing to do with it. But to those at the lower you go on the social hierarchy of caste, the more caste begins to matter to you, and the more frustrating it becomes that those above you in the hierarchy don't seem to think that it matters. And the crucial distinction I'll draw here is that this idea of caste not mattering is actually a political tool, right? It's not just, it's actually ideological, it's deliberative. And because by delegitimizing caste while simultaneously benefiting from it, you manage to empower and stabilize your own position in society as an upper caste person, right? Because when for example, the book tells an elite audience that hey, caste doesn't matter, and the problem of poverty in India is largely psychological, right? That, oh, poor people in India just have, just think in interesting ways and are deluded by Indian society and all of that. And it's very reassuring to those who already kind of are going in thinking that caste doesn't matter. But if you're actually interested in like a serious study of society to understand why India functions and operates the way that it does, understanding caste is absolutely imperative. So, working in politics, right, you really come to understand how much of a critical role caste plays in not just the organization of resources, but in pretty much almost every major decision interaction that exists. It is the single defining characteristic of Indian society, without which any analysis or any study or even any like op-ed that tries to understand the psychology of Indians just cannot function.
Okay, I think let's now move towards the psychology of poverty, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, when I was young and I was reading that anyone who earns 30 rupees in a city is above poverty line, I used to laugh because 30% can't even 30 rupees you can't even buy a chocolate and half liter of milk. Like, how can I be above poverty? Like, where is that food being available? One meal for 30 rupees. I mean, it's a cruel joke on the idea of poverty itself. And even if you see minimum wage 200 rupees, 500 rupees, whatever it is, I think you can't even pay rent, have a two meals in a day with that kind of money. Um, so how does Manu Joseph, make you laugh about poverty? Like, while he does mention these facts, but you say that he trivializes poverty as well in the book.
Correct. I think he does two things at once, both of which are varying degrees of problematic. So, one is that he kind of treats poverty rather than a socio-economic analysis of it. It's kind of does a psychological analysis of it, right? If I remember correctly, in the opening chapters of the book, he defines poverty as anyone who feels economically uncomfortable in their situation, right? Which could be like literally everyone. If Mukesh Ambani wakes up tomorrow and feels that, hey, actually, my businesses are not making as much money as I hope, he could be perceived as having being economically uncomfortable, right? But clearly he's not a poor person in any sense, and the problem he faces are very different. And similarly, I find that many of the definitions used are just so vague that it doesn't have any actual analytical value. But coming to like speaking of poverty, right? So one interesting thing I found about this is that, because when you say that the poor people are this way, right, you're sort of large talking in such broad strokes, and you're sort of almost essentializing certain behaviors to just poverty itself, right? But poverty is not an identity. Poverty is like a condition, a socio-economic circumstance. And so to sort of say that actually, oh, poor people behave in these ways, in my opinion, kind of puts the cart before the horse, right? It takes an emergent behavior and reduces it as like a reason for why people are poor in the first place, or why the poor people uh, are the way that they are. And it consistently does this without any evidence. It does this largely through anecdotes, as it were. And I'm
Mm.
actually interested in what you said about anecdotes earlier, because you mentioned that the anecdotes are very interesting and they're very humorous, and they absolutely are. And the book does make for very compelling reading, so to take nothing away from that. But that also has a flip side to it. It's that the more interesting the anecdotes are, it's because they are unusual. It's because they are often on the extreme ends of the spectrum,
Yeah.
right? And the next step, or the logical or the illogical next step after the anecdote in the book, is always that, oh, because of this anecdote, this is the way things are,
Mm.
right? But the anecdote is actually very often an edge case. It's an extreme case. It's a particular like idiosyncratic behavior or circumstance created in a particular situation. And so then from there to talk about poverty in India as a whole, affecting hundreds of thousands of people, is a huge jump.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid observation. Like, you can't take the extremes and make a generalization about the norm, right? And obviously, middle class is a very prominent topic across all the chapters, and he takes up the issue of revolutions. Like the whole assumption is, if there is a lot of poverty, there should be a revolution. There should be overthrowing of the rich, and the poor has to take over, and they have to kill a few people. I mean, that has happened in French Revolution or Russian Revolution or whatever it is. But he comes up with a theory which I have not come across till date, which is revolution is not fueled by the people in the bottom. It is the second rung elites who recruit the lowest classes based on an idea to overthrow the first level elites. So, and he also, in a way, criticizes the Indian independence movement as well, saying that all the freedom fighters were from the upper caste or something of that sort. Uh, do you buy this theory, or is this theory very flawed or inconsistent with the actual study of revolutions?
So I don't buy the theory for the same reason that actually many of Joseph's theories seem plausible at first, but don't hold up to scrutiny. Is that there's no actual way to falsify them, right? Because no matter what historical case you take, the definition of who exactly is the second rung elite is nebulous, is ambiguous, it's not, it's left up to interpretation and can be interpreted in different ways. For example, the book makes the case that Ambedkar is a second rung elite because he was elite educated, right? Because he spoke English, he went to good law schools, and therefore the Dalit revolution that he led is just seen as illegitimate manipulation because clearly he was just doing it to further his own agenda or something or the other, right? But actually, of course, Ambedkar was not an elite in any sense whatsoever. It was that he fought his way up systematically. At every step he faced discrimination. He had to sit separately, eat separately, drink separately, and so the facts don't support this idea, and yet it can still be argued that he was an elite, and the author would probably tell you that, oh, but because he had education he was different, and therefore it's not actually predictive. It's plausible at first, but it's not a theory that holds any predictive power to me that, oh, elites control everything. And my second problem with it is that it completely disempowers the poor and marginalized, right? In fact, like that's something that seems to be done across the book in various ways. But by saying that the revolutions are just elites manipulating poor people for their purposes, all right, second rung elites leading the grunt army towards the revolution, it's basically saying that the poor, the underprivileged, don't have any real agency and are just pawns in the game, right? But if you look at the independent movement, if you look at the independence movement, sorry, you'll actually see that the entire upper caste dominated independence movement was really ineffectual for a really long time, right? Nothing much happened for so long until suddenly, when we gained that mass participation, when we gained that mass political legitimacy, and Gandhi managed to successfully mobilize millions and millions of Indians towards his cause, right? That's when things began to change. And it's not because they were suddenly fooled, right? It's because to participate in a movement means to actually make the conscious trade-off that trading off my temporary present comfort for these long-term political goals is valuable, and that is a decision people actively make. It's not something that just just happens.
Yeah, so I mean, uh, the poor also make decisions. For example, there is a vote chori movement, but no one seems to be supporting it because people are also applying their brains to certain extent, and maybe they don't find it to be true, even though it might be true. Who knows? Um, the book also talks about this. Actually, this was my one of my last questions, but actually I bring it up because it kind of makes sense. Um, like he talks about amateur Indians, right? Like it's like a hidden, or what do you say? It's like a vague insult towards anyone who is thinking good thinking about the betterment of the country or the society or the poor or whatever it is. Um, it seems like a jibe and like a slap on the face of anyone who has some values and wants to stand up to some values. So, do you think that this amateur Indian exists, or that amateur Indian can do something else so that he can actually be effective or something of that sort?
So yeah, I found the amateur Indians thing a bit interesting. So perhaps I would
I
offer
mean, I
that.
think we should discuss it in the context of Aadhaar and privacy. That is
Hmm,
the case where he hits very hard against the amateur Indians.
hmm. So one consistent theme across the book is that the author assumes this posture of someone who knows, who's like the true knower of the way things work, right? And everyone else is just either being manipulated or just doesn't know any better, including the amateur Indians who are just importing Western values and just hopelessly actually believe that in a better
Because
society is
even our
possible.
constitution has a lot of Western values.
Exactly, right? Like it does have a lot of Western values, and it's a jibe at people who think that, oh, things can change, we can actually have a better society, etc. But what's actually interesting to me is that in many ways the idea that, oh, we're just importing ideas from the West is actually an interesting one, but the author deploys it against his political enemies without actually realizing that that fits the book itself, right? In many ways, the India that Manu Joseph seems most interested in building is a very Western one. He wants India to kind of be like a New York or a Sweden, or where everything flows in perfect order. Everyone cares only about civic citizenship and isn't doesn't care about things like religion and caste and all of that. But which is interestingly a very Western import, right? India is a very collectivist society that functions on patronage and identity. That is the way our social fabric has flowed for like hundreds of thousands of years, and that I think is worth keeping in mind. But as to the amateur Indian as a category, so I find it to be like a funny piece of stand up, perhaps. But again, it's to me, it's just falls into the same trap of thinking that uh, just because a particular group of people right is trying to think is dissatisfied with the way things are, want to take it in a different direction, right? They must simply not understand the situation, or they might actually come from like a
Harvard.
flawed understanding. Yeah, because they're elite, they're out of touch. But actually, I think the reality is kind of somewhere in between. That yes, there are many ways in which elites are out of touch with society, right? In fact, I would say this book is a shining example of the way that elites are out of touch with the way India operates. But yeah, just because but then that someone comes with different ideas, I feel can be a virtue in itself in some ways, right? And it's worth unpacking those on their merits, whereas I feel like this entire caricature is more constructed to kind of dismiss this entire category of people as politically ineffectual,
Mm.
right? And in that way, I find that the core political flaw of the book is that it completely stymies political change, right? That if you take the book's argument to its logical conclusion, it's that, oh, the things are the way that they are, nothing will ever change, India is doomed, type of thing,
Mm.
right? And which can be profoundly satisfying on some level to an elite audience reading it, because it believes it can give the impression that you understand the way things are now, right? That because clearly if things are not changing, at least they don't seem to be when I look left and right, it must be for a deep reason, and now that the book has given me the reason, I am like, I have everything I need. And
Actually, it made me feel good about how frustrated I feel on the roads while driving, right? So every time there is a red signal, someone is cutting it, and I'm also afraid whether I'm going to crash into someone who is cutting a red. I mean, these small frustrations of daily life, I mean, I find it so happy to see this in paper. Like someone is talking about it, but obviously it is not an academic writing. It's more of a fun writing. But yeah, you were saying something.
Yeah, so I'm interested in actually the political purpose served by this kind of literature, right? So in my review, I call it upper middle class anxiety literature, which because in a way, this entire line of reasoning soothes the anxieties of an urban upper middle class person living in a big metropolitan city with many things dysfunctional around them, right? Because you look at things and you be like, oh my gosh, why does India have so many potholes? Or and then the book gives you like a simple and plausible answer, right? Or especially to everyday frustrations, that why is this fellow next to me being so irritating or painfully obsequious. And again, the book always has ready answers for you, and so it kind of makes you feel that you that good about yourself, right? And crucially, although the book is
Not good about yourself. It makes you okay feel that okay, this is why things are like this. Okay, fine. I don't have to worry more about
correct, that now you understand the true nature of things, right? And you have been edified in some sense. But actually, I'm interested in the political purpose, right? Because to me, this by legitimizing many, because the book, the framework, the if you look at the book as a framework, right, it legitimizes certain ways of thinking and delegitimizes others,
it.
right? And it legitimizes the idea that for example, be as an elite person in a city might feel that India is just is just painfully broken, that it doesn't seem to function on any logic. Everyone is just thinking completely misguided and foolish. And but it delegitimizes the idea that things like caste and poverty actually have deep political reasons, right? Political grievances, and stem from certain social problems that should be fixed and made better.
Mm.
And but actually worrying about those is seemingly not in the politics of this book, right? In fact, we are what we are asked to actually concern ourselves with is a very sterile politics of service delivery, right?
Mm.
That actually what we should just be doing is tipping people more, maybe campaigning for better infrastructure, but never actually agitating or airing our grievances politically,
Mm.
right? And in that way, it kind of legitimizes a status quo that is in many ways oppressive to the large majority of people not living in comfy towers in Goregaon.
Koregaon or Gurgaon. But anyway, both are posh areas. But Gurgaon seems to be his poster child. Like even in his show, whatever, what was it?
Uh,
Decoupled.
Decoupled, yes.
Even in that TV show which he has kind of created, Gurgaon is at the center, and like it is like the most absurd city of India which I have seen, because it has like shit infrastructure but 170 crore homes and things like that. So I mean, let us go into some space of speculation. Like, where do you see this city going? Like, can it ever be a livable city? Will the quality of people somehow improve, or is it doomed forever?
So I think I'm not intimately familiar with like the politics of Gurgaon per se, but what I will say is that right now, right, because the way, if you look at the way Gurgaon has come up all of a sudden due to massive capital investment, right, it's created a city of vast inequality where most of it is actually quite dysfunctional. But then you have these elite enclaves of these posh societies that each run their own amenities and make things well for the people inside them, while everyone outside it suffers, right? And the book also kind of gestures towards this multiple times. In fact, I think the single anecdote of the security guard in the gated society
Hmm.
keeping policing entry is used multiple times. How there's even this other very interesting part in the Gurgaon example that I think the book brings up that I'd like to talk about. It's that the author makes the argument somewhere, or at least like uses this as an illustration, that when Gurgaon was being developed, right? A lot of land was bought from farmers very cheaply, right? And
Not
they,
cheaply, but a very expensive price.
right, so that is the interesting part, right? So at a very expensive rate is the argument made in the book. But actually, while for the farmers it was a great deal amount of money, right? If you actually look at the data, you'll find that it's actually a huge undercoat. It's the value of the land, right? It was basically the current the formula used. I don't remember the exact formula offhand, but it was something like the current productivity of the land
Hmm.
times a certain multiplier,
Hmm.
right? Like for time, like okay, this is the amount of value that this land you think can we expect to produce in this much time. But actually that doesn't account for the vast speculative value that built up so quickly,
Hmm.
right? Like if you look at property rates in Gurgaon today, it is astronomical. And in those farmers that were selling off their land were actually paid a pittance. If you compare the amount that they got to the amount that the land eventually sold for, it is not even, forget a few, like it's not even the same order of magnitude. Okay. And so while it was a considerable amount of money, it was still a not a fair market transaction because there was a lot of information asymmetry. The farmers did not actually know what the value of their land was, right? Because they were, and this was not a completely voluntary transaction either, right? It was state assisted. The Indian government actually stepped in to kind of facilitate this Gurgaon's addition into NCR. And and naturally, as a poor person or as like a person of middling income, when someone promises you a great lump sum of money, you will be very tempted, right? And that's actually a very precarious position because, but you don't know how much the land is eventually going to be. But it's still an enormous undercoat. Those people were really hard done, and unfortunately, given the way Gurgaon is playing now, right, playing out now, I only wonder what things would have looked like if the actual inhabitants of Gurgaon, the original inhabitants of Gurgaon, were given a little more say in the way the city actually developed. Because right now it is just a rich person's paradise, right? Where,
It's not a paradise, but yeah, go on.
in the sense that most of the actual the city Gurgaon in a way belongs to rich people in a
Hmm.
way that few like in a very like stark way. Okay, so the idea that I try to draw is that Gurgaon is the gated society model taken to its extreme, where you kind of have this elite exit from the city,
Hmm.
right? The elites are no longer denizens of the city, but actually denizens of a particular society,
Hmm.
and where the interests of the elites are tied to the society and not to the way the city as a whole develops around them, right?
Hmm.
As long as I have all my needs met inside DLF mega city number one, then why should I actually step out or be worried about what is happening to the slum next to me, right?
Hmm.
I don't care at all. And that to me is the core problem that actually has been that much of Indian policy also has to grapple with.
And no other city has taken this model to its extreme. It's Gurgaon which has done it very successfully.
Yeah, Gurgaon to me has actually makes no pretenses. Like at least other cities have this. There's this idea. For example, in Mumbai is a very starkly unequal city, right? You look
Hmm.
anywhere and there are people sleeping on the road, all of that. It's very visible. But at the same time, Mumbai is sort of underpinned by the great Indian dream, where people come to Mumbai to build a better future for themselves in the hope that they can someday live in an ivory tower of their own construction.
Hmm.
But in Gurgaon, there is no such pretense. There is no such underlying promise. It is just the way things are that, okay, you are either in the elite gated society or you are on the street with like literally nothing.
Hmm.
And there's precious little in between.
Yeah, I really want to share this very interesting anecdote. So I met this guy at one of these hobby clubs in Gurgaon, and he said that he's doing farming or something, and he had come to that club just to find someone to date. Like he really wasn't interested in the hobby as such. And he says that he knows a lot of people who got enough money to buy a Fortuner, but they don't have money to fill petrol in that. So that tells you a lot about Gurgaon, like how it's so show off driven and like
Correct, correct.
crazy. Uh, I don't know. I don't have a word for Gurgaon actually. uh, yeah. So moving on, this political purpose. You were talking about the politics and the plausible deniability of all of that, right? Um, it's not like he is not mentioning politics or politicians. Like Narendra Modi is a very common. He comes up at least in 3 4 chapters on many occasions, and sometimes he pretends to praise him, and sometimes he pretends to criticize him. And I feel it's like a cop out, and like, is he doing a balancing act, or what do you think he's doing?
So one of the things that I like to do is that I am less interested in what the author actually has to say or doesn't say about a particular politics, or but rather what is the function that the book serves towards that politics, right? For example, in this case, you're right in that the author avoids he both says, I don't remember exactly, but there's stuff that can be read both ways as far as Narendra Modi is concerned. But if you look at the actual politics of the book and what it does, it's that it aligns with a particular uh, model. Like, so what is actually the BJP and Narendra Modi's politics, right? It's a very kind of like this Hindutva politics is kind of upper class led and driven, right? It's a politics. The core vote of the BJP comes from the urban, educated middle class in many ways. Like, if you look at the voting patterns, you will find that
But that's
the
the historical pattern. Now it seems like they've gone everywhere.
So yes, of course, to win in the Indian elections, you need to win. You need to build a cross-caste coalition.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that if you look at the particular group of the upper caste
Hmm.
Hindu urban educated elites in cities, right? They BJP tends to win overwhelmingly there.
Hmm.
Most of India's urban areas, for example, Karnataka, right? In Karnataka, uh, the Congress swept the last elections, right? They won over 100 seats,
Almost
but
130,
the
140.
yes, but the actual seat count in Bangalore did not change at all. In fact, it remained BJP dominated, and the Congress won one seat and lost another. So there was no net change there, and the BJP has kind of firmly entrenched there. Similarly, if you look at like Gujarat, which is BJP's core, right, the urban areas in Gujarat are constantly won by BJP.
Hmm.
There is no change at all, whereas other constituencies might go here and there.
Hmm.
And but to connect this back to the book, the reason I bring this up is because unwittingly, even if the book may sometimes criticize this politics, right, it still serves to functionally legitimize a certain kind of politics that is very elite led and elite driven. And so to me, it aligns with the right with a right wing view of seeing the world, with a right wing politics more closely than it does with any sort of progressive politics that might seek to meaningfully improve things for the lower caste people in India, for example, right? Because by functionally saying that actually caste is a useless issue and that we a distraction and we shouldn't actually worry about it, you are aligning yourself with a politics that argues that we don't that try that doesn't care so much about caste, all right, which is
Hmm.
like the for example, a lot of the BJP's core politics is trying to make you believe that trying to build a cross caste coalition along the lines of religion,
Hmm.
right? The and so in many ways I find that the book, although it might criticize this the the Narendra Modi or the right wing politics or whatever, or in some sense, right, I find it also functionally aligns with it, and that to me is the more important bit than what it says or doesn't say outright.
But how can you align with something by criticizing it? I didn't understand.
So to me, it's the set of assumptions that the book operates with, right? Because for example, like, so I'll give a middle class example, right?
mm,
So the book keeps criticizing the middle class.
mm,
Okay. So it keeps saying that the middle class are hypocritical, that we consume too much, we tip too little.
mm,
But if you look at it, it doesn't actually go any deeper than that to examine the foundations of why the middle class emerged as it did in India.
mm,
Right? That why is it that in people who earn above a certain amount in India, why are upper castes so disproportionately represented?
mm,
Right? That's because of a certain amount of historical privilege that we have.
mm,
And so the book never actually examines any of that. And so it ends up aligning with a kind of elite politics, even though it might criticize the middle class.
mm,
Right? So, because while reading it, me as a middle class person, I
mm,
might think that, okay, because the book, the Manu is, Joseph is telling me that the middle class are so hypocritical, are so consumption driven, are don't understand the way things are actually. But because that I am reading it, I am not one of those middle class, right? I am
mm,
actually smart, one of the smart ones, because I care enough to read a Manu Joseph book, and now I understand the way India actually functions. And
mm,
so even though the book criticizes the middle class, I can situate myself outside the criticism. I can say
mm,
that I am not one of the middle class being criticized.
mm,
But if the book were to make an argument that's saying that, hey, maybe some of the reason that you have the money that you have is because of an undeserved historical advantage that you have, then that would be uncomfortable.
mm,
Right? And the book never does that. It only talks about the surface level psychology and the stuff that is easy to distance yourself from while reading, right?
mm,
And thus still feel validated even though you are being criticized. So it's possible to criticize something and yet align with it in practice.
mm. That's very interesting. So, coming back to the politics thing itself, he also says that elections are the way in which poor take the revenge. Like by electing very dumb politicians, for example, those who don't know what is AQI or whatever it is, they are taking a revenge on the middle class and the rich. And I can't find or think of any scenario where a poor person goes and votes for the worst choice, destructs himself, but his main purpose is to destroy the rich and the middle class. Like it is so, you have to do so much of mental gymnastics to to come
Uh,
up with such an idea, right? So, I mean, like, where is this coming from? Like, what do you think about this? But I also want to put in this another point that there was this guy called Prashant Kishore in Bihar election who came up with a fairly decent plan and reasonable promises, whatever, at least on paper. But I felt a bit disappointed that the voters rejected him so hard, like so in the face kind of a slap. So, do you think that poor are taking a revenge on the middle class by voting in, whatever mediocre politicians?
So again, this is just like many theories, right? This is neither true nor false, not really falsifiable in any sense. Because, but in my view, what drives the Indian voter, right, is a very complex calculus of interests. It's not simple, and it is definitely not revenge in my as I see it. In fact, this line, this analysis reveals who the true audience of the book is, right? That the audience of the book is not poor people. It is elite middle class people who want to believe that the world is against them, but they've succeeded anyway. And that, oh, look at all these poor people actually conspiring to defeat me at the polling booth. Right? It's kind of like a very cathartic explanation as you read it. But is it true? Well, no, not really, because in fact, the more plausible explanation, right, is that politics, democratic politics, tends to reflect its constituencies. That if India as a whole is very poor and not particularly educated,
Mm,
right? So
mm,
naturally, our politicians are going to be like are going to reflect that, right? Because voters are going to elect someone that they identify with, right?
mm,
That they can relate to. They are not going to elect someone who speaks in a different academic register, who comes from a different cultural background, who comes from different economic circumstances, and is so and does, who we have nothing in common with. right? We are going to elect a leader that seems like one of us because we believe that he can take care of us, right? It's a patronage politics.
Hmm.
Someone who comes from our community, someone who cares about us. And so rather than being any sort of anti uh, elites or revenge politics, it's more just sort of looking out for yourself, right? That suppose I was making a very important decision and I wanted to put about who to appoint for a particular position. Subconsciously I am going to be influenced by who do I believe will be the best for me, and that person, if I'm making a choice between multiple candidates, one of whom comes from a different background and one of whom comes from my community, I'll vote for the person from my community because I'm more familiar with that, it's more relatable to me, right? And so it's largely a function of the fact that India as a whole is quite poor, right? We are quite poor. We are not a culture of very like erudite, ultra sophisticated, rich people walking around. That is an illusion created by major metropolitan cities, and especially cities like Gurgaon, where you can actually, don't have to interact with real India very much.
Hmm.
But actually, real India elects people who look like them, people who vote like them, think like them, and inevitably those people tend to not be liked by the middle, the elites in India too much because, ironically, for the same reason, because we believe they are not like us.
No, but I would like to challenge you on that because there was somewhere I read Manmohan Singh stood for a Lok Sabha election from South Delhi, the most educated, high income kind of constituency. But even South Delhi could not elect Manmohan Singh. What does that tell about South Delhi?
So I'll uh, ask you this then. Then in that case, see, for example, if you're looking at individual examples, right? There are so many. Even Rahul Gandhi, the poster child for, oh, he's so elite, so educated, completely out of touch, got elected like 6 times in a row from like various constituencies, right? In Amethi, Raebareli, Wayanad, and that the idea that we completely reject rich people or educated people doesn't hold up. In Punjab, for example, many Aam Aadmi Party politicians currently, right now, are doctors, professionals, and not like your what we actually think a politician would be like in the Vidhan Sabha. If you're looking for individual examples, right, you can actually find people on both sides of the coin that you will and overall I think that is also the beauty of democracy, in that ideally, you in a representative democracy, our representatives should look like our constituency, right?
Hmm.
That if a constituency, if India is 70% poor, 30% rich, then in an ideal system, our politics should also be around 70% poor, 30% rich.
Hmm.
And in practice, things do tend to play out that way.
Yeah, I mean, like someone said, anything you say about India can be true and untrue. Like, I don't, I mean, it's full of so many contradictions, you can't even put your hand on it.
Correct, correct.
Um, but anyway, as children in 10th standard or as teenagers, all of us would have thought, okay, how to end poverty, and all of that. And we would also feel very angry about inequality and all of that. But as we grow into adults, we realize that true equality is obviously not possible. It's like just a dream. At least maybe equal opportunities might be created, or more opportunities can be created where people can find an outlet. But this book gives a very absurd solution for this dream, which is tipping more. Like, I mean, I don't understand how me tipping more is going to change the politics and the outcomes of the society, right?
Mm.
Like, in which even American politics hasn't changed by 20% tipping. So, what do you think? I mean, where is this coming from? And do you think tipping even helps, even marginally?
To me, it's because the book fundamentally views poverty as a situation to be managed rather than a problem to be solved, right? It's that okay, we have poverty right now, and so we need to manage it to make sure that the poor don't kill us. Right? We need to actually tip poor people more, because otherwise they'll realize that actually things are quite bad,
Uh,
and so out with the guillotines. Right?
uh,
But actually, if you abandon that framework, if instead of looking at poverty as something that is to be managed, you think of it as a grave social problem to be eliminated, then you begin to look at things slightly differently, and the solutions that you offer will again be different. You might begin advocating for redistributive politics, for instance, but the moment you begin advocating for more redistributive politics, you alienate the entire middle class base that the book tries to the book tries to appeal to, who are actually the kind of people who read such books. And that so it never does that, and so instead it suggests things like tipping, because tipping does not, it both seems like a decision that you're making to help poor people, but it does not actually change the fates of the poor in any meaningful way. But it also makes you feel better about yourself, and it doesn't threaten your position in society. Right? So it does many things at once, and in that way it is the perfect intervention to advocate for.
mm,
Right? Because me, as reading it, I'll be like, oh, this makes sense, I should tip more, and I will tip more. And now I come away thinking that, oh, I've taken an insight from this book. I now think that I'm a more charitable and more benevolent person, and at the same time my interests have not been threatened. Right?
mm,
If the book instead says that actually we should tax the wealthy,
mm.
right, that actually we should increase the taxes on the wealthy and fund more poverty alleviation programs, then I might be like, wait a minute, no way, down with Manu Joseph.
No, it's not just wealthy. I mean, like, already a lot of people are the salaried class would be paying 30%, whatever. I think, I mean, so if the book said tax Mukesh Ambani 10% more, then probably there would be more cheers.
Indeed, but the book is again targeted very much at like your middle class audience, right? And the interesting part is that on some level, I think, because there's a great opposition to any sort of tax related argument, right? The moment you make an argument that actually you should tax more, then people begin to feel very uncomfortable. Whereas something like tipping is completely non-threatening. It's just that something you can choose to do or not do at your own leisure, when at your pleasure, whenever you want. And but it doesn't change things, because the point of it is not to change things. Because if you believe that poverty can never be solved, or rather that equality can never be achieved, then why take substantive steps towards trying to do it? Because it's all misguided anyway, right? May as well just manage the situation in the interim.
Mm,
And the so to me, you had asked earlier that, okay, do you think that or that about this equality point, that whether equality can actually be achieved? To me, it is like irrelevant. Whether equality can actually be achieved or not, to me, does not matter as much as making society slightly more equal.
mm,
Right? Because whether the ultimate perfect idealization of that goal is possible does not matter as much as whether it is possible to make meaningful steps towards a situation that is less unequal than it is now, which is very unequal indeed.
mm,
Right? But to dismiss it outright as misguided suggests that the path there is not worth undertaking. And
mm,
that is the problem, that you don't need something to be perfect 100% realizable in
mm,
order to for it to be like a substantive goal worth taking. Right?
mm,
Is a perfect democracy achievable? Perhaps not really, because in a society where power relations are unequal, some people will have more power than others and be able to influence more votes than others. Right? Does that mean that we should not be democratic at all? No, it does not. The same holds true for many principles, and I think equality, or for almost all abstract principles actually, and I think equality is just another example of that.
yeah, definitely. It's not like we should give up just because the perfect equality is not achievable. Uh, but I mean, whatever suggestion he is giving is obviously very absurd.
Definitely preposterous.
It's anyway. I mean, I feel sorry for anyone who's trying to follow it. But anyway, is there? I mean, I'm done with all of my questions. Is there anything you feel you wanted to add, but you didn't get a chance to add that?
Hmm. I think I just like to. So I'm very interested in the rise of this genre of book, right? Of this kind of non-fiction writing that no longer actually is interested in advancing any sort of political theory, but just serves as instead as entertainment, right? As a way for people to soothe their anxieties about the way India operates now. And I think I'd just like to end by perhaps inviting people to, you know, think more critically of the books that they read, because there is actually uh, a great deal of writing now in the market that says a lot while demonstrating very little, right? And so left to its own devices, I feel like this sort of writing in the long run undermines the very idea that non-fiction books should uh, deliver truth in some sense, or at least like something substantive,
Mm.
right? So yeah.
That is, that will probably, change the opinion of many people who like this book. But obviously, they'll have to read it with a critical eye. But anyway, thanks for making time for this conversation, and we'll share this and see how far people get a different opinion on this book.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.